There is a kind of silence that doesn't come from the absence of people, but from the quiet places inside a person that no one has ever learned to enter. Some people live there, not because they don't want connection, but because connection has always carried a cost they were never able to afford. You see them, the ones who move through the world with a soft distance, who slip out of gatherings early, who laugh gently but never too loudly. People call them independent, low maintenance, or private. But behind that calm surface sits something far more fragile, a fear shaped by years of disappointments, unmet needs, and the quiet belief that closeness is dangerous. This is the unseen psychology of those who stay alone, not out of preference, but out of self-protection. There is a moment, usually small, almost forgettable, when a person realizes they've been living behind an invisible glass. It happens in the middle of ordinary life, while sitting among friends, feeling present but not fully there, while answering a message hours late, because something inside them tightened at the thought of replying, or while stepping back from a conversation, unsure why their chest felt lighter once the closeness faded. People think isolation starts with a choice, but it rarely does. It begins with patterns so subtle that even the person living them cannot see the shape they're forming. They tell themselves they just prefer being alone, yet there's a weight to that preference, a weight that doesn't exist in genuine solitude. It's the way they rehearse sentences before speaking, the way they keep their deepest thoughts carefully folded away, the way they feel exposed when someone looks at them for too long, or asks a question that brushes too close to the heart. There is always a reason behind emotional distance, but recognition usually arrives slowly, in soft, quiet fragments. Like when they notice how relieved they feel after plans get cancelled, or how they retreat the moment someone begins to care, or how they smile at the right times, nod at the right moments, yet feel something tightening whenever the world tries to come closer. They sense it most during the in-between hours, late at night when the noise fades, or early in the morning when the world hasn't fully woken up. That sips when the truth becomes harder to ignore. The silence they live in is instead peaceful. It's saps protective, a boundary carved from experience rather than preference. In this chapter, recognition isn't a grand revelation. It's a slow awakening to the smallest reactions, the quiet flinches, the subtle withdrawals, the tiny hesitations that no one else notices. But these are the footprints of a deeper fear, one they've carried longer than they remember. And for the first time, they begin to wonder, is solitude something they chose, or something they learned? Every fear has an origin, though it rarely announces itself clearly. For people who stay alone, the beginning is often buried in places they stopped visiting long ago, the early years when the world was first teaching them what closeness meant. Sometimes it starts in a home that looked normal from the outside, but felt unpredictable on the inside. A parent who loved them but didn't know how to show it. A caregiver whose approval came in waves, warm one day, distant the next. Or the quiet, unspoken rule that emotions were something to hide, not express. Children learn connection the way they learn language, through repetition. And when affection is inconsistent, they learn inconsistency. When love feels conditional, they learn conditions. When their needs are met with silence, they learn to silence themselves before anyone else has the chance to. This fear doesn't come from dramatic memories. It grows from moments too small to remember individually. The hug that never came, the apologies that were never offered, the conversations that left them feeling unseen rather than understood. Eventually, they begin to associate closeness with confusion, with effort, with uncertainty. And so their young mind makes the safest choice it can. If connection hurts, distance must protect. Sometimes the fear is born from loss, a friendship that broke without explanation, a betrayal they didn't know how to process, or a person they loved who suddenly disappeared from their life. Loss leaves echoes, and the echo teaches them that letting someone in means giving them the power to leave. Other times, no single event can be blamed. It's the accumulated weight of being the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who learned early that relying on others usually leads to disappointment. The child grows older. Their world expands, but the script remains the same. Closeness feels unpredictable. Distance feels controllable. And the fear, once tiny and unformed, becomes a quiet guardian, drawing them away from others long before they even realize it's happening. It is here, in these early roots, that the story of their solitude first begins. By the time the fear reaches adulthood, it no longer looks like fear. It looks like independence. It looks like competence. It looks like someone who has it all together, calm, self-sufficient, unbothered. But beneath that steady exterior lies a nervous system trained to survive closeness by avoiding it. Psychologists call it avoidant attachment, but to the person experiencing it, it simply feels like instinct, an automatic tightening, a quiet urge to step back, a subtle pressure to protect the inner world at all costs. This pattern is not dramatic. It sits precise. It's the brain choosing the familiar over the vulnerable. Because somewhere deep inside, closeness registers not as connection but as risk. A risk of being disappointed, misunderstood, or emotionally depended on in ways they don't know how to handle. Avoidance becomes a kind of emotional muscle memory, not a decision, a reflex. They pull away not because they don't care, but because caring feels like an opening that their body doesn't know how to keep safe. Their heartbeat quickens when someone tries to get close. Their mind constructs quiet escape plans in conversations that feel too intimate. Even joy can feel uncomfortable when it comes from another person, as if happiness given by someone else can be taken away just as easily. Behind this distance lies a neurological truth. Their brain learned early that self-reliance equals safety, so it reinforces behaviors that keep others at arm's length. Hyper-independence, emotional neutrality, a careful avoidance of needs. People misinterpret this as coldness, but it's really a sophisticated survival strategy, a way of staying in control, a way of preventing the helplessness they once felt. What most don't see is the paradox burning quietly inside. They long for someone who can understand them, yet they shut down the moment someone tries to. They crave connection, yet feel overwhelmed by it. They want closeness, yet their body interprets closeness as danger. This is not a flaw. It is psychology, a protective architecture built from past experiences, now functioning long after the threat is gone. And until they recognize this internal system, this silent guardian, it continues to guide their relationships, shaping a life where staying alone feels safer than being seen. There comes a point when the distance they've built begins to feel less like safety and more like hunger. Not a dramatic, desperate hunger, but a quiet one. A longing that presses gently against the walls they've constructed, reminding them that human beings were never built to live entirely alone. This is where the conflict begins. Because despite everything they've learned, something in them still wants closeness, the warmth of being understood, the softness of being known without explanation, the steady presence of someone who doesn't leave when things become real. They want these things quietly, almost secretly. But the moment someone steps too close, a familiar instinct wakes up inside them. It starts as tension in the chest, a subtle need to retreat, a sudden irritation at the very person they wanted to let in. Confusion crashes into desire, hope clashes with fear, and the heart becomes a battlefield that no one else can see. They tell themselves they sit better off alone, that people are unpredictable, overwhelming, too demanding. But the truth slips through in unguarded moments, when they see two friends laughing effortlessly, or when they remember a time someone cared for them just a little too deeply. They feel the contradiction most sharply in relationships. They want intimacy, but emotional closeness feels like exposure. They crave presence, but dependence feels suffocating. They long to be understood, yet the idea of being truly seen terrifies them. So they live in a push and pull rhythm, reaching out, then withdrawing, letting someone in, then disappearing without explanation. Even they don't fully understand why they run. They only know that staying feels far more dangerous than leaving. And beneath this conflict lies a quiet self-blame. They wonder why they can't love the way others do. Why affection feels heavy. Why their own emotions confuse them. They don't realize they're fighting an internal system designed to protect them, not sabotage them. This chapter of their life is marked by contradictions, wanting and resisting, approaching and retreating, craving connection yet fearing the cost of it. A war fought in silence, a longing wrapped in armor. And the deepest question of all begins to whisper. How long can someone run from what they secretly need? There is always a turning point, though it rarely arrives loudly. It doesn't come as a dramatic breakdown or a sudden realization. Instead, it appears in the quietest moments, in the stillness where their mind finally has space to hear itself. It might happen one evening when they return to an empty room that once felt peaceful, but now feels strangely hollow. Or when they scroll through their messages and realize they've pushed away every person who once tried to stay. Or when someone kind walks into their life, and for the first time, the distance they create feels more painful than comforting. The turning point is not a confession, not a breakthrough. It is a subtle shift, a growing awareness that the solitude they once thought protected them is now beginning to cost them. They notice how their avoidance shapes their days, how they leave messages unanswered until the other person stops trying, how they keep conversations shallow to prevent anything real from forming, how they retreat into busyness, distractions, or silence whenever they feel emotionally exposed. And yet, the loneliness that follows feels different now. It doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like a life slowly shrinking. For the first time, they begin to question the story they've lived for so long. They notice that the safety of isolation comes with a quiet ache, an ache that is no longer easy to ignore. Perhaps they meet someone who sees through their armor gently, without pushing, someone who doesn't take their distance personally, someone who waits instead of demanding. And in that softness, something unfamiliar stirs, a realization that not everyone will hurt them, that not every connection leads to loss. Or maybe nothing changes externally at all. Maybe it's simply the weight of their own longing, becoming too heavy to rationalize. A recognition that avoidance is not peace, but fear wearing the mask of independence. This moment isn't healing. It is instead transformation. It is simply awareness, the first small crack in the walls they built. But cracks let in light. And with light, the possibility of something new quietly begins. Healing for someone who stays alone is never sudden. It moves slowly, like dawn, not with a burst of light, but with a subtle shift in the atmosphere. A softening, a loosening, a quiet curiosity about what life might look like if fear stopped leading every step. It begins with awareness, not action, not change. Just the simple recognition of their own patterns, the way their chest tightens when someone cares, the way their instinct pushes them to retreat, the way they confuse self-protection with self-reliance. This awareness doesn't fix anything, but it opens a door they once believed didn't exist. From here, healing becomes a process of learning the difference between danger and discomfort. For years, their nervous system responded to closeness, as if it were a threat. But now, they begin to notice that some discomfort is actually the feeling of growing, not breaking. Slowly, they start to check in with themselves. They notice what triggers them. They identify the moments when they shut down emotionally. They observe, without judgment, how quickly they retreat when someone tries to love them. And when they do open up, even a little, it feels unfamiliar, sometimes overwhelming. But unfamiliar is not the same as unsafe. Healing also involves understanding that needs are not weaknesses, that wanting connection does not make them dependent, that allowing someone to care doesn't erase their independence. It simply means they are human. Over time, they learn to regulate their emotional responses, to breathe through the instinct to run, to let themselves feel without immediately retreating into silence. This does not make the fear disappear, but it makes it less powerful. Some people help gently in this process. Friends who give space without abandoning, partners who offer closeness without pressure, people who understand that healing is not a straight line. And perhaps the most important part of healing is this. They begin to trust themselves again, to believe they can handle closeness, to recognize that their past shaped them but does not have to decide their future. Healing does not mean becoming someone else. It means finally becoming someone who no longer hides from their own heart. In the end, the journey of someone who stays alone is not a story of weakness, nor a story of failure. It is a story of survival, of a heart that learned to protect itself long before it ever learned to be held. And like all hearts shaped by caution, it moves slowly toward warmth, testing the world one cautious step at a time. There comes a moment, often quiet and uncelebrated, when they look back at their life and realize that solitude was never the enemy. It was the shelter, the temporary home their younger self built so they could grow safely within its walls. But shelters, by their nature, are not meant to be permanent. They are meant to keep someone safe until they are strong enough to step outside. In this gentle stage of their evolution, they begin to understand something profound. They were never afraid of people. They were afraid of the parts of themselves that people might touch. The vulnerable parts, the soft parts, the longing they tried so hard to silence. Now, with new awareness, they move differently. Still slow, still cautious, still thoughtful with their trust, but no longer completely closed. They allow conversations to linger a little longer. They let someone stay, even when their instinct whispers for distance. They speak truths they once kept hidden. And in doing so, the world becomes less threatening and more human. Healing does not erase the past. It integrates it. It teaches them that fear was not a flaw, but a compass pointing to where they needed care. And now, with gentler eyes, they can see that connection is not the danger they once imagined. It is the experience that makes life feel textured, warm, and deeply real. One day, they discover a quiet truth. The heart they protected for so long was never fragile. It was simply waiting for safety. And as they move forward, they no longer stay alone out of fear. They choose connection slowly, softly, intentionally, not because they need anyone, but because they finally believe they deserve to be known. A life once defined by distance begins to open, not loudly, but beautifully.